All right, it's a little after 6 o'clock. Want to welcome everybody to the Spanish Fork Planning Commission this evening. I've asked Commissioner Mendenhall if he would lead us in the pledge.
If you'd all rise, repeat the pledge with me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
All right, looking at the agenda, we've got a couple of conditional use permit public hearings. Do we want to adjust the agenda at all, move things around for the people that are here and try and get those knocked out first?
You know, I think these first ones really should go fast.
Okay.
It's maybe my suggestion.
Okay, so I'll turn the time over to Mr. Snyder for the conditional use permits.
Thank you. And Mike, if we can advance to the first one. So you're right, we do have two conditional use permits. Both of those are cell towers. The first one is on 5th South. The next one we'll look at is 700 North. So this one, it's kind of hard to see in this aerial image, but the existing tower, see if I can get this to work. Oh, there we go. So here's the storage units here on 5th South. There's an existing storage, not storage, but compound, excuse me. There on the north end, just across from the ballpark. So if we go to the next slide, I can't remember. Okay, so what it is basically just replacement of antenna and existing equipment. Staff feels this one's pretty straightforward and has no concerns with it. Any questions for staff?
Anything going higher, or is it
Nope,
same height?
it's not increasing.
Or less? Okay.
Okay, with this being a public hearing, let's go ahead and open it to the public. Is there anyone here that would like to speak towards the cell towers? Okay, as you approach, if you could just state your name and try and keep comments limited to about 3 minutes, if that's all right.
I'm Ralph Brinkerhoff. I live at 445 East 600 North. That cell tower's in my backyard. My wife suffers from electrical sensitivity. And a lot of the medical people think that that tower triggered her problems. When they boosted the power on it a couple of years ago, since then, we don't have a television, a telephone, a computer, a microwave, or any other thing in the house we can live without. Because of that, the American Cancer Society comes out and says the rays from that thing are dangerous. Now, I don't know if they're going to improve, make it more powerful. If they are, we don't know what's going to happen. It's pretty scary. The second problem I have is that they're a lousy neighbor. If they have a problem with that thing, they bring a light plant with a diesel engine and work through the night in the people's backyards. You can't sleep. And I'd like to get you guys and the city council's phone numbers so I can call you, come over and have donuts and hot chocolate while I'm watching them work on it, because I can't sleep.
How often does that happen?
They have only happened a couple of times that I remember. It may never happen again, I don't know, but it's happened. The next thing is, unfortunately, we have an easement through our yard for power. And the last time they did it, they ran a power line through our yard. Everybody went home and left us a big damn mess. And my wife's home right now in tears, thinking they're going to do it again. And I said they're not, because I'm going to have a signed agreement. There's going to be 2 men responsible to fix it, or they're not going to start. And that's what I'd like to say. That number one, that park was donated by the Pinniger family for a park for the people. And Ken Pinniger, their son, who was a city council member, told me that his parents left that driveway very narrow because they felt like some greedy city council in the future would sell it off for housing lots. That's why there's just a narrow little driveway to get in there. And they didn't know about cell towers 60 years ago. Nobody did. But I don't want to see any more power put on that crazy thing. And I don't even know if it's legal, how much that power they're putting on it now. Seen any figures on it, but there's a law that tells you how much you can use. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. If there's no one else, for this one, I guess we'll close public hearing. And anybody on the commission have any comments that they want to make on this?
I'd like to know from staff if we do know anything about the power of these units and whether that's being increased. It's something that's beyond my knowledge.
And are these 4G units? Anybody know?
They are.
Do they have any plans to make these 5G units in the future?
Do you know that question? I don't know, do you know whether they're putting more towers in? They are adding an antenna or replacing an antenna. That's the gist of this one today. I think we were talking about the other one first, though, the one that's over by the ball fields. Yeah. That's the one we were talking about. I think the gentleman that was just up here is actually talking about the second one on your agenda. So keep that in mind when we get to that one. The first one, however, I think the only modification is a new antenna going in on that one. And that one is not near any homes directly. I mean, it doesn't sit in anybody's backyard or anything like that.
So I have a question. Who can Mr. Brinkhoff call when somebody's breaking the city ordinances of sound in the middle of the night with lights? Because that's obviously not in compliance with our sound ordinances.
The sound ordinance, yes, it's not. In fact, usually in order to work in the middle of the night, most of the time, it's usually UDOT or somebody else, not usually near housing.
Right. Who does he call, though? He says he's had the issue. Do we know who he calls? Can we give that number to him?
It's honestly, it'd be 911 or dispatch, one of the two.
Yeah,
So-
and you can have police officers show up.
I thought the sheriff probably.
Sheriff doesn't,
Spanish Fork Police.
yeah, sheriff generally doesn't have jurisdiction in Spanish Fork. The local police would
Spanish
have
Fork Police.
jurisdiction for. Sheriff can back up and come in and help in need, but generally it would be the Spanish Fork Police Department. You can have them come out. I mean, if it's interfering with your ability to sleep, yes, of course.
Well, it's a pretty powerful diesel engine, it's a pretty powerful light, so it can work up 80 feet in the air.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
No, that sounds great. Thank
Part
you.
of the beauty of this being a conditional use is that when an issue like that comes to our attention, if you're inclined, you can impose conditions as to the maybe hours that somebody could work on maintenance or that type of a thing. It sounds like occasionally these events might be more on the emergency side of things, but I think regardless of that, you do have the ability to impose those types of restrictions relative to when work's being completed. And I think Mr. Snyder in the report included some language relative to restoring any property that's impacted with the work that would happen as part of this project. I'd like to think that that's a given, but you could be as explicit as you'd like to be to make sure that that happens. In fact, on the other issues that were raised, I think it's within your purview as well to require the applicant to have some correspondence with a neighbor relative to their concerns about that facility's operation and any impact that it has on the things that were mentioned, appliances or any of that type of a thing. None of us here are experts relative to that type of impact or what might be available to reduce it for a neighbor. This particular site, you know, is much closer to dwellings than most of these towers that end up coming before you for one thing or another. So I think considering conditions to address these very specific issues that have come up certainly makes sense.
Got a question real quick while you're up there. Who owns the land that most of these cell towers sit on? And
Most are
city owns, so let's say the city decides they don't like their lease, so if the city decides they don't like a cell tower on their property, what's that process look like?
Under the contracts, we don't have that ability to generally get out of those.
How long are the contracts generally?
They range anywhere from around 30 years. I just had communication with one that's up on Canyon Road. That one is not set to expire until 2035.
The,
And we are not extending it as of right now.
they do anything to break the contract or do anything that's
Then we can terminate it.
non-conforming, you
Yes.
can terminate it
Yes.
at that point?
Aside from something like non-payment, so if they fail to pay, they have the ability to make arrears and fix that. But other than that, if they breached for some reason, other than that, yes, we could call the contract and get out of it.
I know that in many cases, repair work and work on certain things like roads and other things have to be done at odd hours of the day and night in order to get that work done and be the least interruption, have the least interruption to the entire community that's surrounding it. In those cases, Spanish Fork City has a great telephone system now to get neighborhoods advised of things like when they need to turn the water off or the power is going to be out for a period of time. You know, it seems to me like if Spanish Fork can do that, the entities who own these towers ought to have some ability to get word out to the residents if there's going to be work and let them know what's going to be done, how long it's going to take, and what will be done. In other words, are there going to be lights? How much noise is there going to be? And maybe we need to look at those kinds of situations so that the neighborhood knows what's going on in the middle of a block or somewhere else.
I think that is one of the conditions you can place on those. I think you can require the applicant to give notice when they intend to do work on those towers. And that way, because the city doesn't control them.
Nope.
We don't have any ability to know necessarily when, because under the contracts, at least the city-owned properties that these sit on, they have basically free ability to work on it. We don't interfere with that. So we don't necessarily know that they're going to work on it. Sometimes if they have to cross or need additional power abilities or something like that, where it does affect us, then we will get notice of that. But aside from that, you know, or digging trenches or anything, we don't generally know what's going on. So if you want to make the applicant do that, I don't think there's any issue with that.
I think it makes sense that we make those kinds of things in neighborhoods where homes will be affected. It would be nice also to know about the power of these towers and this equipment. I'm not an electrical engineer and I have no knowledge of this kind of stuff to make that kind of a decision, but it seems to me like that's something that's fairly easy for them to provide to us, to the city and to the residents, so that that can be discussed intelligently. And I'd suggest that as we make a decision on these, if we're going to approve them, then we should make that part of the process, that when they do work on those, that the neighbors are advised of the timing, what kind of work's going to be done, what kind of equipment will be there, and that any contractor is usually responsible to clean up whatever mess they've caused, and we ought to be able to put something in there that they must return it to equal or better condition when they're finished with their work.
Like that.
Where this one is, I don't know who actually
This one
owns
probably
that.
isn't a problem.
Oh, this is
This is the fifth
This is our
south.
property?
Yes.
Okay, we do have it, okay.
We're just kind of discussing his issue, and we won't have to discuss it on the next one, but I think that's a reasonable request.
I think so.
I think he's brought that, that's a reasonable complaint, and it's not one that's hard to
No, and
improve. I don't
you're
know if you
allowed-
take care of it.
You're
but we
allowed
improve.
on a conditional use permit, you are allowed to provide or require certain reasonable conditions. To me, that is a reasonable condition.
Sure.
Right?
Just provide simple notice to the residents in the area, so they understand what's gonna happen and when it's gonna happen. So if they decide that they wanna take a short weekender or something and take off, they can get out of there. If they
And in defense of the person that owns the tower, they're going to work on it sometime.
They are.
And
They work on it normally during the day.
right. And if it's required that they have to shut it down or something, I can understand that they would do it at the least used time. You know, they would want to have the least amount of inconvenience to their customers that they have. So it may happen again, but they should advise the neighbors in that area and, you know, possibly through the city or something like that. Seems like it's a workable situation.
I think if you guys want to make that a condition, by all means,
Okay.
do that.
Thanks.
I think we should do that. I would add to your condition though, just a little bit and make it time-bound. So it needs to be within 4 weeks or some reasonable amount that the landscaping goes back to either better or same condition.
Sure.
So I don't think they want to deal with,
As it was before the work was done.
and is 4 weeks reasonable, you think?
I don't think it takes 4 weeks. If you've got to get in there and make any kind of revisions or work on that unit, and you know you're going to go in there, it's planned usually, and if it's not, they should have someone that can get in there. I don't think that the city would ever need 4 weeks to go in and repair someone's yard if you had to cross it.
What's reasonable?
10 days.
Overnight, generally they do it overnight, correct? One night? Do they work on it one night and then they take off? Is that?
What's part of it?
When they work on the tower, you said that they did it throughout the night.
I think it's a different
Did they
issue.
work on it one night, or they work on it
Multiple nights.
multiple nights?
They're asking me to remember a lot.
I think we get the gist of it. Could
They
we?
did it at night and then they come back during the day, I think. I can't remember.
I mean, we can require within, a week, have them repair it to the, I mean, it doesn't take much. The only issue they may run into is if they extensively damage the grass area and stuff, it may be hard to find
That's
a
what I'm saying.
landscaper
The
within
weather,
it.
The weather could also be a
The weather
contributing
could be
you
factor.
ought to give them a little bit of time to fix it.
I mean, if you want to go, a month may be reasonable. I don't know that they really need that amount of time, but I think
But
it's
on a winter
reasonable.
day or something like that, and they
That's
did
true.
some extension, or some terrible damage or something, I think it's only.
It may take a while before they can get in there and fix it.
So when we get to this, and maybe this is, I think this is actually something that we could attach to almost all of these cell towers because they're coming to us very often. That they're either modifying them or adding or doing something. I think it's something that we could ask staff to come up with a language. We can make the proposal and I think that staff understands what we're talking about now. And rather than us try to come up with the
Well, I think for
particular language, let
tonight's,
you guys do that.
tonight's purpose, I'll just tell you that, for the one, not necessarily this one, but the other one, just put in that, the requirement of notice to the residents immediately around the cell tower property.
Sounds good.
Notice requirement being the date, time, equipment that's gonna be used, and then,
Any damage that's incurred be repaired.
needs to be repaired.
Within reasonable time, and we're thinking
Within
somewhere
reasonable
between
time.
2 to 4
You may
weeks.
want to just leave it as reasonable time, so that you start throwing in time frames and it may get difficult, especially during the winter.
Yeah, good point.
Okay.
Any other comments? All right, any motions then for the 500 South Verizon cell tower?
Are we approving this, or are we,
We
You
approve
are
this one.
the,
we're approving this one? Then I would make a motion that we approve the 500 South Verizon cell tower modification.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's move on to the 700 North T-Mobile cell tower, which is also a public hearing.
yeah, so this one is a very different environment, different surroundings. We do have some pictures, we'll have Mike pull those up, showing the tower and the support structure. So this is when you enter the park. It's back in the south east corner of the park property. You can see they've got in this scenario, all the equipment is fully enclosed in this brick structure here. And then the antenna and whatnot are mounted to this wooden pole here. We then have another picture. This is just an up close shot of the, yep, there's the structure. And then the one just north of it shows the mounting pattern of the antenna. And this one's similar request. They're looking to swap out some of the antennas and swap out some of the equipment. And so as you just heard from our legal counsel, there is some opportunity for you to place some conditions. When the DRC did look at this one, they did have a recommendation that the landscaping be restored to the original condition when any installation is complete. And so as you see fit, you can add some additional conditions to this proposal.
So I'm wondering if we can look up Mr. Brinkerhoff's home on Google and so we can
Yes.
see it there where it's in proximity?
Yeah, if we don't mind pulling up either.
This is Little Cleveland, we used to call it.
This
Yep.
home. Oh, over here?
Right there,
There you go.
Okay, thanks.
So the tower pole is right here.
This is the right of way, I'm guessing.
Yep, that's the access.
Little Cleveland, we used to play a lot of ball right there when I was a kid growing up. Big time. Neighborhood ball games, just like Sandlot.
Sandlot.
30 years ago, I did a thrown ball from my yard across the park to the neighbor. That was 30 years ago.
When you're 9 years old, you can't.
Any comments for staff before we move to public hearing?
Nope.
Okay. Move that we open this to the public. If anybody has any comments, additional comments on this one, come forward and state your name.
My name is Lynn Renlisbacher. My home's right where your arrow is. So are they just changing antennas then? The wood pole structure would still stay there?
That's what it sounds like.
They're not going to put up a metal one, a 100-foot monopole or?
This is the before existing, so that's an antenna. They're all antennas. This is one, that's one. They're swapping them out for that one, this one, and that one.
Okay, that's what I just want to clarify, that it's still a wood pole, not a metal. If you're going to switch the poles one day, then I want to see a pine tree. You know, the kind they hide inside the fake pine trees.
Okay.
Cool.
And then, is it just one carrier, Verizon still, or are they adding more carriers?
This one's T-Mobile.
This is T-Mobile.
T-Mobile on this
So
one.
they're gonna put more equipment on the ground?
Doesn't sound like it
No.
from just the change of the antennas.
Okay, so nothing, that everything will still stay in the brick shed? Okay, that's what I was just coming to, sounds like I'm safe still.
Good. I'm just curious, since you're here, are you experiencing or your wife experiencing any of the kind of health challenges that your neighbor, Mr. Brinkerhoff, is experiencing?
I don't know, that's one of my rental homes. I don't live there,
Oh, okay.
yeah. It's my
Thank you.
house, but I don't live there, so,
All right. Just curious.
okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, move that we close public hearing. Commissioners have any comments on this one?
I think this is the one, I think that this is the one that we want to put the conditions on that we talked about, and I think those are good conditions. The staff has asked that we include the condition that the landscaping be restored to the original condition when the installation is complete. We ought to add that any surrounding area that is impacted, which would include private property, be returned to its original condition. And
Make the motion.
Did you also, sorry, did you say notifying the neighbors as well?
Yeah, I think that we need to do that, and I'll make that as best as I can, and we'll see how it goes. So I would make the motion that the 700 North 2019 T-Mobile cell tower modification be approved under the condition that the landscaping be restored to the original condition when the installation is complete, including private property that is in the area. And condition number 2, that prior to any work that is done on this tower, notice be given to the landowners in the area, and that notification should include the type of work that's going to be done, the type of equipment that will be used, the time frame, including time of day, and the date that that work will be completed, and that any remediation to the site is completed in a timely manner.
Excellent.
Well said. I'll second that motion.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Brinkerhoff, is that okay?
Okay.
Say hello to your wife for us.
All right, next item on the agenda, we've got zone changes for 3 properties, which are also public hearings. We'll start with the Brent Larson.
Correct. So we do have a number to go through. This first one, if we can pull up, yes. I don't know if it's our lights or if it's our selection of the images that we put in their reports, but that or I'm colorblind, but it doesn't look very bright tonight. So this is out on the west side of town, just south of 900 South along 1700 West. You can see the property is outlined there. This did also carry a recommendation for you from the DRC, and we'll get into that shortly. It's just under a half acre, and the applicant is looking to add on to the home, as well as doing some remodeling. And in the process of talking with staff, discovered that what he was looking to do would not comply with the setback requirements for the RR zone. The RR zone has a lot more stringent setback requirements and minimum acreage requirements than the R115. So staff, we did look at the general plan for the area with the applicant and felt that it would be appropriate to consider a rezone down to the R115, so that would give him slightly smaller, reduced setbacks to work with. And so some of those findings are that, it is currently zoned RR, and the general plan designation, medium density, would be consistent with the R115. Currently, the property is his residence, and that would not change, nor do we see it impacting much on the area. The condition, or recommended condition from the DRC, as well as staff, was in looking at the property with our city surveyor, there may be some survey issues that would need to be addressed, just to clarify exactly the extent of the property that's associated with the rezone. And so as you see fit, we can recommend that that be resolved with city staff. Any questions for staff on this item?
I have one question regarding the boundary there. That goes over into the neighbors quite a ways. Is that something easily resolved with just some?
Further west. So I did have a chance to sit down with our city surveyor and kind of discuss what he thinks might be the issue. It could be bad description as far as the tie from the monument, or it could be a shift in all the properties. Sometimes you'll see like a quarter section or a section off. So that's why the recommendation from the DRC and the city surveyor was go ahead and get a survey done of the property, confirm, does it actually extend across the street, or is it off? We are, let's see, 1700 West, so it's
There we go.
right here. Yeah, so you can see some of them are off and then others are not in the area.
Okay,
I believe
the applicant here.
the applicant is here, if you'd like to invite him up and
Yeah, does the applicant want to speak to this?
So the property line, what I'm aware of is just, you can see that tin shed. I don't know how you use that. Oh, right there. You can see that tin shed? Yeah, right there. That's where the original fence was. And so it comes back. So if you, I mean, you look at the property that goes over that way, if you move it back, that's right in line with, you know, what it was originally. And so I'm just adding a garage onto the back, but we're just trying to change those, change the zoning so I can do that.
Just add the garage?
Add the garage.
According to what we saw, it looked like your property now extends over into the neighbor's yard here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's Wayne's, and he also, runs right in front of his house, so.
We don't think that's correct.
I couldn't imagine that it would be.
There's these
Map drawn.
irregularities with their parcel maps on lots of
Right.
different areas.
Well, that house was a one-room schoolhouse in 1893, so it's been there a long time.
My mother was born in that house.
Okay. Your mom's,
Betty Lou
Oh, yeah,
Francis
yep,
at the
okay.
time.
yep. Went to Disneyland with them, so.
That's right.
Any other questions? So I've ordered a survey. It's probably done. He's just doing the paperwork, so, I mean, we'd like to go through it if it goes through the city council. So, we good?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. This is a public hearing, so I move that we open this to the public. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the Brent Larson zone change? Okay, seeing none, I move that we close public hearing. Any comments from commissioners on this one?
Nope.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion. This is a recommendation for city council.
Recommend the city council approve the zone change for the Brent Larson property from RR to R115.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's move on to the Fire Station 62 zone change.
Thank you. Yep, so this is, this is a rendering of what the fire station will look like. What we have before you is not actual review of the site plan, but it's the work preceding that, which is rezoning the property from the residential zone that it is currently in to a public facilities zone. So if we jump down advance one slide. This is a, kind of give you an idea of the layout that they're finalizing right now, and how it would be situated there on the corner of the property. If we go back up 2 slides to the area that's to be rezoned. So as you can see in this image, there used to be some structures. The city has purchased the property and has removed the structures, and so the property is currently vacant in anticipation and preparation for the fire station. And so the city is recommending approval of this rezone. The DRC did meet and did discuss this item. Some of the findings that are appropriate for this request is currently, as you can see, it's zoned R19. That's a single-family residential zone. We feel that the best zone to change that to would be the public facilities zone, as that zone is intended for public uses in the community, and we feel that that is consistent with the city's general plan. And then of just additional note is that obviously there's a need for the fire station in this part of the community, and so we feel that would be beneficial as far as making that change tonight. And as indicated by the chair, it would be a recommendation to the city council for final action. Any questions for staff on this one?
Yes, how many mile radius from this will they be able to serve the citizens of the community? Is it 5 mile, 10 mile, what's
So if
the,
it's within the community, that'd probably be up to the fire department to have their own policy as far as type of call. Maybe they need response from both stations, maybe it's serviced from this station only. I would assume if it's on the east side,
coordinate effort
see a
depending on the
response
need?
out of here. But then the city does have a contract, as you're aware, to service Highway 6. And so I would assume having this station on the east side of town would increase
Response time.
response there and decrease the response times.
I'm sure our public safety advisor has got that in his maps and stuff like that. It's drawn up with that, also with our insurance and everything else is drawn up, so it picks up them boundaries, and that's where they meet them. One day, we'll have the same thing down the Leland area.
Currently, when the fire trucks get called up Highway 6, what route do they typically take? Do they go up Center Street? So in this case, I assume they'll probably go up Canyon Road, not Spanish Fork Parkway, and then up Highway 6?
Don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
You have to ask those people, the fire people.
It's a pretty
I
direct
don't
route
say
to
this one would be the
Highway
one
6.
going up Spanish Fork Canyon, though.
Sure.
I'm sure that there'd be a rescue truck involved in this and everything else.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have it on this.
It would take 5, 10 minutes away from the other way.
Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing, so is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to the Fire Station 62 zone change? If you don't mind approaching the mic so that the people at home can hear you.
We want to know who you are.
I'm Chris Biesinger.
Thanks, Chris.
Will this have just fire trucks or ambulances stationed here as well?
Good question. We'll get staff to answer that. Any other questions real quick before we turn it over to staff?
My understanding is that they're going to have all public safety apparatus here at the station. And so we'll have 2 dual full-service fire stations for public safety, EMS, all the above. I just realized that we failed to put out your name tags, so.
Badges.
We didn't want anybody to know who we were.
Badges, we don't need no stinking badges.
Thank you. Any other comments for this zone change?
My name is Lori Zaremba, and my husband's deaf, so he wouldn't hear the noise, but I would. How much noise do we anticipate from this? Because will be much closer to some residential areas. Just curious about the noise that will.
Good point. Yeah, also, another question on that. What direction are the trucks gonna pull out? Would they pull out towards the homes that are across the street on Canyon Road? And are there any bedroom windows that are gonna be right across the driveway of those fire trucks that are gonna be coming out? So a couple good questions there. I don't know if.
I don't know that I can answer that, but I live on the east side of town, and even with my windows shut and stuff, I hear the sirens going up Highway 6 now. So it'll be a lot louder for you guys than it is for me, but
Do they run their sirens in the evening or middle of the night? Anybody know? Or do they only
usually, yes.
Or do they only do it when traffic's heavy, or I don't know what their procedure is?
It really depends on the type of call and also the policy of the city. Each city has their own policy as far as when they should go and send a siren. I think a lot of these are great questions, and maybe more appropriately answered at the site plan approval stage, because then we will actually have representatives available that can address those more thoroughly.
You ever watch the 24th of July parade? It won't be that loud.
How about the baseball championship?
Well,
Maybe.
So as Mr. Snyder mentioned, tonight's just the zone change. After the zone change process, they'll do a preliminary plat or a site plan where more of your questions would be able to be answered by the experts, so. Any other comments? Did we already close public for this one?
Close it.
Okay, move that we move out of public hearing. Any additional comments from commissioners? Okay. Anyone with a motion for this?
Motion recommended City Council to change zone of the fire station 62 zone from R19 to PF with the following findings.
I'd second that.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's move forward now with the Arrowhead Trail zone change.
Okay, so this one, let's go ahead and advance to the area. So if you recall, this one came before you recently. It's there on the corner of Del Monte and Arrowhead, and a number of years ago did obtain approval for hideout storage. They obtained site plan and conditional use permit approval. Didn't act on it. The approvals were then voided as far as expiration goes because there was no action taken. The city did have some concerns with some of the potential uses that could go on the property where it is zoned I2. So that's our medium industrial zone. And so if you look at the list of uses, many would feel that probably storage units are some of the least impactful. And so the city did make start the process to rezone it. When it got up to the city council level, they did make the decision that the applicant should be given some time to reapply to gain approval again for that storage unit project. And so they directed staff to come back with this rezone request after they had submitted a complete application. So basically, if the storage units fall through again, then the city at that point will have already rezoned the property, and then we can look at some other uses that may be appropriate on the corner. And so what we've got tonight is we're looking for a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council as far as rezoning this property from the I2 to the RR zone. It's rural residential, which staff kind of sees as a good placeholder. And so if the storage unit project does not move forward, we would then have a rural residential zoning in place before any uses could then be applied for on the property. Findings that are appropriate is specifically that. It can function as a holding zone for this area, and it may be developed in the future under a different zoning classification. Any questions on this item for staff?
So has all the landowners been talked to about the zone change?
So notices do go out, and we did have quite a bit of response, as you recall, at the last, or not last, but 2 planning commission meetings ago. Many of the residents actually came out and voiced their opinion that they'd rather see the storage unit project go in here than other uses that might be associated with like a commercial zone or a high-density residential zone. So yes, we do reach out.
What about the landowners themselves?
Yes, and we actually met with them. I don't see them here tonight.
That's the only thing
Yeah.
we know everything else.
We actually had them on our DRC this morning, now that I think about it. And so they have obtained site plan approval for the project to be reapproved, and then their conditional use permit was recommended to you for approval. And so you'll see that in your September meeting.
And the other property owners north of there, they have been contacted and part of the procedure.
That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
This goes all the way over to ALA, to the road? Or
no,
does it just
we're
go
look-
right there past
Yeah,
that residence?
we're looking just at the area outlined in blue.
Okay.
So if we go to the, do you have the city map up by chance, the interactive map? So what we're looking at tonight is just
Is just
this
that.
corner piece right
Okay.
here.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, let's move into public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the Arrowhead Trail zone change tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing. Commissioners have any additional comments or questions on this? If not, then I'll entertain a motion.
Go ahead, Clint.
Oh, my turn? Okay, I'll make a motion that we recommend the city council to approve the zone change for the Arrowhead Trail.
Got a motion?
I second it.
And a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, let's move on to section 4, zone change and preliminary plats. First one we have on the agenda is the Unella Townhomes.
Yes, and we do have quite a bit of information available for you. If you don't mind, let's go ahead and pass these out. We've got Andre and Greg that just...
Oh, great. Good to see you.
Scott here to best answer some of the questions that you have, but we will kind of run through real quickly. We do have a number of slides, if you don't mind jumping to the Google slides.
Oh, you get your own.
So hopefully this area is familiar. We did do a general plan land use designation change on the property, so the south area here. Has it been 5 months already? It's 7? Time flies. So maybe you don't recall, but we did visit the area recently there off of Expressway Lane, and so the desire was to keep potential for commercial along Expressway, but then north of Maggie's, townhomes at Maggie's Bend there on 870 North, just off of Marketplace Drive, additional housing product. But this project actually has a number of different styles and units and sizes and product. So what they're looking for tonight is both a recommendation on the zone change as well as preliminary plat approval. Property is currently zone CO, which is commercial office, and they're looking for an R3 residential designation that would get, which would be in line with the type of density that they've shown on the plans. So staff in reviewing it does feel that it's consistent, it conforms to the general plan for the area. And any conditions we can discuss. The DRC, when they did look at this item, had some recommendations for you to consider. One would be a consideration for the wall on the north of the property. And we'll get into that as we kind of go through the site plan. 2 would be any concerns with parking. They'd like to see parking standards spelled out specifically, I believe, in the HOA as well as the CC&Rs. And then the city engineer did give a recommendation that, let's go ahead and jump to the site plan if you don't mind, it'd probably make more sense. So here on Street 2, which would run north-south and connect with the Expressway Lane, it'd be appropriate to allow street parking on that road. Street 1, which is running east-west, the recommendation is not to allow on-street parking there, mainly due to the sheer number of driveways that you've got on the north side, and then also you've got the private drives as well as some guest parking spaces that are dispersed throughout the project. So overall, we're looking at 102 units. It's a master plan development, and so there is some opportunity for the applicant to provide a nicely designed project, but then they have some flexibility as far as the unit sizes, the lot sizes, setbacks, things of that nature. Let's go ahead and jump into the slides. And probably what I'll do is invite the applicant up to kind of speak to, so they should match. I went through the book that was given as well as the documents that were emailed to me. So these should match. I can't promise that they're in the same order, but if you don't mind, go ahead and just...
So, hey, Brandon, before he comes
yes.
up, so is all these changes that you addressed, are they in condition number 1? Addressed in condition number 1, because all you've got in here is that
Yes.
the applicant addresses any issues imposed.
Yes.
So that's where they're all addressed, right?
Unless you feel they're not items that need to be listed as conditions. So
Okay.
if you see it differently, or maybe have a different way of addressing it or wording it, then you have that ability to alter it or change it or just strike it. Okay,
Thank you, Brandon.
thank you. Any questions for me before I sit down? Thanks.
It's been a while since we were here. Guys, your staff's had us work pretty hard to make some changes and bring it into what they wanted, what they'd like to see. And hopefully we've done that. So is there any specifics you'd like us to address?
Sure, I just have a question for you. I'm looking through your printout here, and you've got some nice parks in here. Where are they gonna be? Back down here on this end? I should take my pointer.
So you'll
Right
have
down
the-
in here?
Yeah, you'll have the one park there, and then you'll have this area over here, the small one.
Over here? Okay, great. And that's what's being represented in here?
It is, yeah.
Okay, great. And then,
I assume this gives a fire truck enough room to turn around if they need to. Okay.
The street here, part of your project is that you'll put that street into the development, is that right?
Correct.
And then this continues into the existing development just to the south?
That's a vacant.
Vacant?
Currently
Well, it's not
vacant.
vacant, it's BC's property. They are,
There's not a road there
There's
currently.
not a road there now? That
no
was-
road there.
That was a
It's for
question.
future use.
But there are homes, townhomes right here, is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
here,
and it Okay.
is important to note, they will be doing some improvements on the western
On this side.
boundary line as well.
So it's vacant from probably about right here over, is that correct?
Well, there's they're off of the aerial image, they're further south.
Right about, right there. Okay,
I see it.
Perfect.
So that road's
There you
gonna be about right here.
roughly,
Correct.
about right there.
Any word on the north end properties? Anything currently planned for that? Anybody know?
It's still in wetlands. It's a long-term potential there could be.
Do you guys own that property? Okay.
So that being the case, who can address or talk about the fence or wall that you had mentioned?
If I recall, the intent of the discussion was just to get a uniform fence along the north and maybe something more substantial.
What's the reason for wanting a fence on the north with it being vacant and wetlands on the other side? Just wondering if we just leave that open on the north side.
Well, I think you'd probably, with the improvements to the property, you'd probably want some kind of border or delineation, whether that's a fence, a wall, or something other than that. PRC's taking that, they'd like to see where it could go commercial in the future. It'd be nice to go ahead and get that wall in first.
I think just leave it and let the commercial build the wall, personally.
That's the way to look at it.
my next question is on just, seems like it's inconsistent on your elevations. And I just was looking at page
Probably what we could do is
4.
let's go ahead and advance through the slides and kind of speak to it, because what Greg did
Okay.
say is staff has taken a number of looks at this and they have made modifications as we've requested to kind of
Okay.
better fit with.
You have this on the presentation?
I think they do. Can I tell you some highlights?
Yeah, please do.
So on here, we've done some things.
Oh, Andre, can we catch you on the microphone? Thank you.
We've done some things to try to break up so you don't look down and it looks like
Alley.
an alley.
Great, thank you.
And so we have put some, like on some of on the units on the ends, we've moved the doors to the north side of those units, so they won't come
Okay.
out the front. Well, depends on what you call the front.
Sure.
The new front will be that side, so that'll break that line up.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that on some of them, and then also we'll put some bay windows on that side to break those up. There was no way to make it work on each of them printed that way.
Sure.
So we did break that up though and try to make
Good.
that so it's our thoughts have been to make this project something that'll last a long time and stay nice, and so we're trying to do
Good.
things that have helped us have that. You know, the staff has asked us to put multiple sizes of units in different styles, and so we've done that.
Thank you, we appreciate that a lot.
And we've tried to do a lot of things to help this project really be a nice project.
And we hope it'll help you sell as well, and keep good residents for a real long time.
Yeah.
Great. So, do you want to go through?
I'd be more than happy to, or if you guys want to speak to the imagery that you've provided us with and kind of
Yeah, we can do that. This is the landscape plan. It's got playground area here. Just, there's your park at the end with the wall around it.
These images are supposed to, our landscape architect used the images, they should be, according to him, they should be, they should represent actual distances. So it says,
To
these
scale.
should be to scale and they should look like what we're getting.
After 5 years or 10 years? 'Cause those are really nice trees. Are you putting in that, I mean.
It's scale on distances and stuff like that, and landscape. He says these are actually what has been called out in landscape.
That's cool.
So I thought that was, these guys are getting pretty fancy.
Yeah, I'm
It is
impressed.
nice for us and nice for you because you can see some of the things that.
Helps with visual
So I
learning.
know we've,
Only Audis are going to be allowed on the street, is that right?
Notice that?
I know in the past we talked quite a bit about landscaping, Dave, and number of trees per development and whatnot. We'd even talked about designating certain trees or the same type of tree per street. When developers come in like these guys, do you guys sit down and say, these are the trees that we would like on your street, or do you give them the say as to what they plant?
We actually have a street tree list, so they have options, but definitely if there's overhead power lines or other things that might be impacted by certain species like a larger tree, then yeah, it makes sense to consider other things.
That's one thing I think probably still that we have to do is to go through their landscaping plan with a really fine tooth comb though.
Yeah.
So we would likely do that if you recommend one thing or another tonight on the project before it goes to the city council. And if there are any changes they need to make, we'd let them know. The landscape architect that they're working with on this has been really good to work with, so I wouldn't anticipate we'll have any issues there, but.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, and what you're seeing, I've actually gone through that with the landscape architect, excuse me, I'm gonna find my water. And so what the code, I'm breaking our own rules, goodness. Calls out for is, you do see on the south side, we've got a row of trees. You have street trees that are required along the corridors. And then overall project area, there's then a few additional trees that are added based off of, if you've got so many square feet, you need a tree per 1,000 square feet or something of that sort. And so they have gone through and actually done a really nice job as far as not only the landscaping around the active areas, but around the units as well.
Good.
Okay.
Are we gonna talk about parking at some point? How many units, or how many parking stalls per unit, that kind of stuff?
Be happy to. Let me grab my water, but where you can throw that. So with this type of project, they're providing a 2-car garage for each unit.
Oh, wow.
As well as
Nice.
the guest parking, and that's tied to the number of units, and so they do comply with the required amount of parking for the project.
You know what the ratio was?
I can look it up real fast.
And driveways, are there gonna be enough for people to have a car in a driveway and in a garage, or how's that gonna work?
All the units here on the, if you go back, all the units here have this rear entry alley load,
Oh, okay.
so they will need
There's
to,
no-
they'll need to park in those.
No parking.
Okay, no parking there.
Ones on the north that are front entry, they have they do have enough room in front, they could park.
Okay, so where do guests park for those that have that alley?
We
See
have-
these little areas?
Those
Section.
areas there is where their guest parking will be, okay. Because if they have 2-car garage, that usually will take care of the homeowner, but guess is what you're saying, that's gonna be enough for them. Okay.
As you can
And
see,
now
all
that-
these units up here do have a driveway.
And I think that it's actually nice, is we have enough parking, and now that we've got, this staff has recommended that we use the number 2 road and be able to have parking on that. That'll actually give us quite a bit additional parking. That's what we've got.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, I have more questions, but are you gonna cover any more on here, or do you wanna?
We can go to the elevations if you'd like.
Yeah, elevation's where I'd like to go to.
So these are the potential playgrounds that you're gonna see.
Those kids are having fun.
Yep. It's working out. Go ahead and advance to the next one. So one thing that we did discuss a number of times with the applicants, and they've been great as far as responding to staff's feedback, is, and this is a discussion topic that has been before you a lot, is the idea of the four-sided architecture, making sure to pay attention and have details on each side so we don't have blank elevations. So this is the north side of the street. You do have a 5-unit configuration and then a 4-unit configuration. Both of those on the north side are front-loaded. So that's what you see here. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. Go ahead one more. Oh, go back one, sorry. So this is showing, you see some of the same materials and colors and schemes and whatnot carried around to the sides as well as the rear. Go ahead and advance, please, Mike. This is, I should have taken this out. This is an earlier elevation, so you can see what we wanted to avoid was on the bottom where you've got just the blank stucco look.
So that's where you want to update this for the city council. Because pages in here are showing me this,
Those ones as well.
and that's why I don't think the city council, I don't want to recommend that to city council.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. This is the 4-unit layout, so go ahead and advance past this one. And then on the south side of the road, one more please. We've got the row house layout, and these I believe are 5 or 6?
Five.
And
So
so like Andre mentioned, yeah, exactly what you're pointing out, we've got the bay windows, and then we also have an elevation
nice.
that shows the front door. If we can advance to the next slide. One more. Oh, keep going, sorry. There it is right here. So this shows on this unit where the
Side door.
door has been turned to the side, so we have presence on the east-west street. Make it more inviting as far as driving up and down the corridor. And so what we see here, oh, too far. But it's good to know that we're almost to the end of the slides. Let's go up one more. So this is the front elevation
With a side entry.
with the side entry. Go up one more, please, Mike. Oh, sorry.
That's not how that-
Another one. Oh, go backwards then, sorry. Oh, that's good right there. So advance one. So this is the units that would have the bay windows. The discussion we had as far as which units might have the bay windows instead of the door facing the interior road. We do have that guest parking that's provided throughout, and so where these buildings might be close to those, the applicants did have a desire to keep the bay windows on some of those units. Go ahead to the next slide, please. This is the rear, it's kind of washed out, sorry. Next slide. This is the end, so you can see on both these scenarios with the door turned to the side or the bay window kept, you can see the materials and architecture similar to the front.
So I'm looking at your corner units that have the doors facing north. You've got a sidewalk that comes to the door from the north. You've also, in the images, got a sidewalk. Is that not gonna be there? Okay.
That was a design, we all agreed that pretty late, and trying to get him to get everything updated was a struggle.
Looks good. I like it.
Thank you.
So just one quick comment, I just recommend you update pages A 4.2 and page 6 to be in compliant, or coordinate with your page 5.
We'll get the landscape guy to get all of them up to date.
There you go.
There's more mistakes than that.
Oh, all right.
All right, this is a public hearing, so let's move into public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the Anella Townhomes zone change and preliminary plat? Please come forward. If you could state your name again.
My name is Crispy Singer, and so, well, the pointer. So this is my dad's and our ground.
I think it's the second button down. This one right there.
Okay, right here, this is a horse barn. This is the greenhouse. This is a hay barn, but this is where our animals are right now. And then I live right here, Dad lives right here, Mom and Dad live right here. So several things. Number one, we've owned this ground since what, 91, Dad, 92? And it's been, when I built, when Dad built, every time we blue staked, there has been different surveys along here. I just want to make sure that the fence line is the property, or, I mean, granted it's only 4 feet, but we have had stakes before inside here 4 feet. Is there an aerial, or are we on the same page? Will this encroach? Am I giving up ground I'm using now for this?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We've been right on the fence. And
Right on the fence?
Yeah.
Again, if we're not giving up ground that we're using now, glad to have new neighbors. Next, the elevation. I was talking to these gentlemen last night, and the elevation at the top of the shingles won't be any higher than is already existing on Maggie's Bend. I think you assured me of that last night. You'll be no higher than current elevation, probably lower.
Our road is going to be a lot lower, so we're going to have to, it's just the way it lays out, and because our road is lower, we're going to have to make sure that we,
The next thing is this elevation here high enough that you're gonna have to put in the barrier walls between my house, between our property and yours?
some places we probably don't.
What will they look like? We're gonna have a big raw slag of concrete coming off the hill. Can you put in the nice decorative ones that they put between you and Maggie's Bend? Is that at a cost?
So they are required by code.
Oh, Brandon, you may need to come up.
Oh, man, shoot.
Rule breaker.
So city code does require when you have a higher density residential project or zone associated with a lower density residential zone, they are required to do a masonry wall. And
For
so
the
it will be similar to what Maggie's Bend has around the exterior of their project.
For the entire distance?
They put decorative fences down low.
Yeah.
Will the decorative fence be down low, or are you gonna put, or will it be a yeah, now is that gonna be, so is this our ground now, or is there gonna have to be a concrete barrier wall up higher and then put the decorative fence on top?
We could probably pull up the grading plan and have the applicant speak to that specifically, but to answer Commissioner
this is
Argyle's
really low.
question.
This is I mean, you
Yeah.
got 20 feet from here to there in elevation.
So the required wall places would be the south property line, and then it actually wraps around the east side as well. And so that's why the DRC in their recommendation, they were looking at just the north wall.
You're talking this way,
Yep.
around here,
Up
over
and
here.
stops right there. Yep.
Stops here, you said?
So Chris, from their property line, their property height, it'll be 6 foot high. From their property height, 6 foot high,
The fence.
their fence.
Yeah, so from the bottom of their fence down to me,
They'll have to fix that or whatever's gotta be. You're gonna have to.
with what? Yeah, retaining wall. Similar to the one they've got, you're having them put in with Maggie's Bend, those the big white block ones? Yeah, that looks good. As long as, I mean, especially those embossed ones look really appropriate. Is that okay? Are you comfortable with that? I mean, I don't want to add any expense, but as long as we're putting it in, because I sit on my back deck and I don't want to, it'd be nice to have something nice. Any other things I might have missed? The last thing I've got on my mind is, see, these houses here are accessed by your driveway here, is that right? There won't be any driveways coming in off this street?
No.
So, proposal, can we leave this easement in there, so someday when I'm dead and gone, and they put this road in, there's still an easement, but in the meantime, can that be grass and a little park? To say to these residents, we're not looking past you, this is home?
I think part of the issue is they've got front doors.
But they won't be
Oh, no,
walking,
is that
but
right?
rather than asphalt,
Do a walkway?
Can it be grass?
We also have city codes that require mid-block connecting streets, and so that would be a concern. Another might be the residents in the future may not want to see the road go through and just keep the grass, and so we lose that opportunity to have more connection.
And that can't be put in the
between
bylaws?
projects.
That can't be put in the bylaws that this is easement someday?
It certainly could, and I think that's a great idea. Our experience has been, unfortunately, when it comes time to do that, and people have, you know, they've had that lawn maybe for 10 years, whatever.
Don't want to lose it.
That really becomes a tough.
Because this looks really weird, because it's just gonna be a 10-foot fall, just drive off and then nothing. Just nothing there, there's horse poop.
We'll have a 6-foot, really pretty fence that'll go around.
Then what's the definition that, I'm impressed here with the concentration of trees along there. Are each one of these represent a tree?
Yes. A bush or a tree.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I think that's nice. It's one right there.
Jim, get up to the microphone.
Jim Biesinger. I'm the old man. Didn't used to be. Right, Richard?
That's right.
Up on you.
You still look young to me.
As you can see here, this distance and this distance are not the same. There is a taper, as what Chris was alluding to, was that line right there is not a parallel east-west line. This is the correct east-west line, but that's what Chris is. You're here, over here at Maggie's Bend, it drops to a foot or so wide, and over here it's 4 or 5 feet wide.
Is that the surveying issue you brought up?
Surveying.
Yeah, there it is right there. There's a fence line in the existing line. Looks like a survey line.
So I'm not sure.
Existing fence is the X with the line in between the X's, and the surveyed line is the solid line.
So
So
I-
it is encroaching on.
Well, what this exhibit is calling out is that there was a boundary line agreement that was agreed upon in 2007.
Okay, so the boundary line agreement is a solid line? So, okay. So I guess that answers that question.
Yeah, and Scott's here, he can.
Sorry.
We're gonna have to start asking lots of people to come to the mic, you know?
Yeah. Now, back to the plot plan. We talked about from the property, or from the finished grade along this line, there'll be a 6-foot masonry stone fence. Okay, which end of the slope is the 6 foot measured from? The bottom of the slope or the top of the slope? Because if we run it at the top of the slope, if we're 6 foot here and the slope is in this direction, it'll be 6 foot plus over here.
It could be steps, you know what I mean, but from their
But
property.
over here on my
their-
piece of ground,
that-
right here, as you drop off right here, that fence is 4 foot high from the finished grade.
But the final product will be 6 foot all the way across there, no matter what happens there.
Minimum.
On there, yes.
So it could be 6 foot plus.
Well, I'm sure as the ground goes down, you might have a step in, but you'll still
Right,
have the 6.
But 6 foot minimum.
That's right.
Because right here, I have a 4 foot minimum.
But our city requirements now, they have to have that
When
6
was that
foot.
city requirement?
Back when I was in,
Since Maggie's
back when I was in, the back when I was in the city council.
Okay, so this is a non-conforming structure and probably should be corrected at another meeting.
But a problem, okay.
I'm just trying to make sure that what we have is what we think, that memory situation, short-term memory, long-term memory. I'm approaching long-term memory. Anyway, so that's my question, but as far as what I see here, it looks like a beautiful project. And if, what you're planning on, I guess, as far as grading, is that you're going to have, generate your own cut and fill on property?
Yeah, because see how our road is so far that way?
Right.
We're gonna have to have those houses actually, we have to come down.
Right,
And so we're gonna
right.
come closer to you.
So when you get up here at this end,
That's gonna be
are you going to cut and retain?
probably not on the park area. The park's gonna stay the same, and it's gonna be, our landscape.
Stepped
guy
up
is
to it.
Super excited, and he loves that area, and he wants to.
He starts to salivate?
Oh, he does. He's here.
All right. I guess my concern is that I don't like stinky agricultural areas either. But if properly managed, the agricultural area here shouldn't become stinky. It's all a matter of not controlling and maintaining proper manure.
If the owner lives there, they're gonna take care of it.
The owners are gonna take care of that, so we're hoping that we can be good neighbors to you, so.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim?
Anyone else that wants to speak to the Inella Townhomes project, zone change? Okay, seeing none, I move that we move out of public hearing. Any commissioners with additional comments or questions?
Sounds like your neighbors like it.
Yeah, it looks great. Okay, entertain a motion?
Motion to recommend to city council approval of the Anella, is that how you say that?
Nella?
Townhome zone change and preliminary plat approval from, let's see, what have I got? That CO to R3 with the following findings and conditions.
Have a motion
I second it.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the High Sky Estates zone change and preliminary plat.
Did you recommend the preliminary plat as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys being here tonight. We've got a full agenda, and as you can see, we've got a few more items to go through. This next one is on the east side of town. Excuse me. High Sky Estates are also looking for a zone change as well as preliminary plat approval, so similar to the last project we just looked at. This one is going from our RR zone, our rural, residential zone, to an R115. There are a few key issues that we can go over. This kind of shows the existing landmarks. We've got the steakhouse, I believe, there. Elementary school you see off to the east here, Canyon Crest Road, which currently dead ends into the property here. And then 2300 east is the west border of this project. So it'll be a nice completion of that Canyon Crest Drive, as well as provide some additional building lots up on this beautiful bench. Some of the things that we did discuss with the DRC specific to the request that we've got tonight, some of those key issues, we do have some hillside development regulations. Later on in the evening, our Assistant City Engineer, Mike, is going to touch on some of those. This project is tied to that. It'll help end with a better product as far as that hillside is concerned. As far as the proposal goes, it is consistent with the general plan designation for the area, which is estate density. They are looking for the master plan development approval, and so once again, what that allows is similar to like a PUD. They can have differing lot sizes as long as they've got no higher density than what's permitted as far as the base zoning. And so as you look at this, we do have some larger lots along the edge of the hill, and then we've got slightly smaller lots as you head north, but they're still rather substantial. One thing that the applicant was looking for was a reduction on the setbacks, which is an option with a master plan development. They can come in and propose a certain type of housing product, and with that, it may be appropriate to look at reductions in the setbacks. What they were specifically looking at was reductions in the side yard setbacks to go from 2 10, so 10 on each side, to a 5 and a 10. The DRC, and this is their recommendation to you for consideration, was based on the lot sizes. It would be more appropriate to have a reduction on the rear setback and keep 10 feet on both sides. And so that is listed in the staff report for you as far as condition number 1.
Keeps our square footage.
Exactly. And then the other thing that was addressed was public utility easements currently, and this is not a big issue, but currently all the lots show a 10-foot, I believe, public utility easement around all the sides. And a lot of those can go away in the rear and the side yards. Usually the utility providers nowadays are not going into the backyards and such. And then the last item from the DRC recommendation was a uniform fence along the south, and that would be as far as the lots that are on the south side of Canyon Crest Drive, just above the hillside. And so those were the things that were considered by the DRC. The ones of main importance to staff is recognition that we do have some proposed changes to the hillside development that would be applicable to this project. And so any sort of recommendation on this item, we'd recommend you include the passage of that hillside ordinance as well.
Condition number 2.
Yes. And it's on your agenda as Title 15. I believe it's the last item that we'll consider tonight. Any questions for staff on this project?
Yes, I have one for Dave Anderson.
He's been hiding out in the corner way too long.
I just know he's been around for my question. It's the longevity question here. So, Dave, are the proposed conditions here similar to the conditions of the other developments that are to the west of this one? Because I really like the looks of those developments to the west. Are they comparable where you're going with these setbacks and side and everything?
The lot configuration here is a little bit different than what we typically see. We have lots that are wide and they have a good depth. I think every lot here has more than 100 feet in depth, and 100 feet's kind of our typical lot depth. So you have good depth. You also have wider than normal, if I'm on the right track to what you're talking about, which is why we as staff feel like it's appropriate to go ahead and keep 20 feet between homes at least by having a 10-foot setback on each side. And you should still be able to site a really, really wide home on there. I think all of the lots have in excess of 100 feet of lot width. So you're talking about an 80-foot wide home plus. And I won't speak for the applicant, but typically when there's a request made to reduce those side setbacks, it's just to make it easier to accommodate a wider home, which a lot of times means a home also with a side entry garage or that type of a thing, which, like with the development to the west, Vincent Ridge, we hope that we see more of in Spanish Fork. We really, really do. In fact, we hope that this project, like Vincent Ridge, doesn't end up getting bought by a production builder, that instead, you see maybe a variety of different builders building in this neighborhood. But we think there's plenty of room to do that by meeting those typical side setbacks. The rear setback, however, I think really is a different story. If somebody wanted to have maybe a little bit deeper kitchen or something like that popped out, that it got closer than 25 feet to a rear property line, typically nobody notices that, not the adjoining neighbor on the back or anything like that. And it simply gives somebody, again, a little bit more flexibility on the design of the home and the ability to maybe include some features in the home that otherwise they couldn't fit. Were you talking about setbacks primarily, or?
Setbacks, and then next question would be overall. Is it overall the streets are the same as Vincent Ridge, for example? That type of thing, landscape kind of things?
Everything in terms of the design of the development, street width, even lot width. It's very, very, street width is identical. Lot width, I think, is very comparable.
Okay.
The Vincent Ridge project was the first project in this part of the community that has been developed with what we're calling that estate residential general plan designation, and therefore it has the R115 zoning. This will be the second in this part of the community. And we certainly like the direction that it went with Vincent Ridge, so.
Excellent, thank you.
Dave, if I see a neighborhood that's recently built that the homes look like they're within 5 feet of the property line or the fence, does that mean that there was a condition in that preliminary plat that allowed for that setback?
With the master plan development, that means that setback was reduced as part of the approval process for the master plan development, yeah.
So Dave, we also talked a little bit the other day about this on the geotech studies with the developers and stuff like that. Is that somewhere in the conditions that's going to be addressed by the developers so that there's no harm done by, to the homeowners and to Spanish Fork City? you know, especially these side lots and stuff like that.
Yeah, the condition that Mr. Snyder described that's really, really important is simply making this project's approval contingent upon having the new Hillside development standards approved. And in all honesty, we're probably out of the best order that we could have on your agenda. There's a reason for that for tonight. With the Hillside development standards that we have, the criteria to build on slopes of a certain grade is very, very clearly spelled out. I don't think there's any room for confusion or disagreement, and this project certainly falls under those criteria. In part, you know, the southern part, you know, along that slope, it would. And I'll just add to something that, again, Mr. Snyder pointed out. I personally feel like this is a very, very important project to have happen, just because of the lack of street connectivity that we have in this part of the community. And an important part of being able to have Canyon Crest Drive connect over to 2300 East does involve making some changes to our Hillside development standards, so that, you know, as we took the field trip a couple of nights ago, you saw what that dead end looks like today. That's going to require some very considerable regrading of this property. And there are some diagrams that we have, I think, in your staff report that show ultimately what that will look like when it's finally at finished grade and homes are constructed there on both sides of Canyon Crest Drive. And I really think having that road connected is long overdue, and it's great to finally see this opportunity.
Just as long as we know what the material's like underneath to hold it when you're grading.
And that's exactly like you said. That's where the geotechnical guys come into play, and we rely on their direction.
So I can't really tell from this, are these the two homes that are the last homes on that street?
Yes.
There's not anything right here, right?
There are two lots there that haven't been able to be developed because we have the turnaround right now at the end.
Okay, there we go.
We actually,
So would homes be able to go on these two lots?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
The
In
grade
fact,
is cleaned up a little bit.
we met with the owner of one of those just a few years ago, and I assume he's as anxious to build now as he was then, so.
So Dave, while you're here, I know the city's been doing a lot of work on the trail system. Where will this connect into the new trail system that's going there? Do you know?
2300 East, really nothing going east-west, so I think it's just the north-south on 2300 East.
So they'll just drop down off 2300 to the south and connect in there?
Right.
Okay.
Questions for staff? Okay, this is a public hearing, so I move that we allow the public to speak. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the High Sky Estates zone change and preliminary plat?
My name is Dawn Bloxam. I live 3 houses down from that dead end. I could say that I don't ever want that dead end to leave. So as a resident, I'm fine with it being a dead end. I'm a mom of 5 kids. I'm from 17 to 4 years old. My 4-year-old is an autistic child. She's nonverbal and a runner. So I would like all possibility of trying to reduce traffic on that road. I don't know if we could put a bend in the road or some kind of barrier or something to try to reduce that road. Our neighbors on the 2900 Street, they have had studies done by the Spanish Fork Police Department where they have tracked speed on that road, and they have tracked speed from 75 miles an hour on the road on 2900, a residential. I'm worried that that same thing will happen on Canyon Crest Road. We also have, because 2900 is a street that's easy access, easy out, easy in, so they've had a lot of car break-ins. So we're concerned that that might happen too with our neighborhood, with a lot of car break-ins, because it's easy out, easy in for the theft. So those are just my concerns. Also, the school, it's not only my children, there's several other families that have children there, and it's also a school zone. So with that with that potential of that speed going, it could be endangering for the children that are going to be going to that school in that area. And those are just my concerns.
Anyone else?
I'm Fred Vincent, and I've got a farm right across the road from where this development is. It's been there, my old granddad homesteaded it, and I've been on it for quite a few years myself. But my concern, I have an irrigation ditch. The company has piped it. It comes down to the northeast corner of the Berenson property. Then it comes in an open ditch, comes over along the east side, and then it comes straight west down through there, about 2/3 of the way across, and gets to my property. And I got about 50 acres right there that I've got a farm. And I'm very concerned about where that pipeline is going to be, whether it's going to go through the back of houses or underneath them or down the road. It's a 30-inch pipe that delivers that water. And I've been approached by the city talking about pressurized irrigation. The prices they quote, there is no way that I can have it in agriculture with the water, the price of pressurized irrigation. And I'm got at least this summer, and they've got a drip system on it. But if something goes wrong and I've got to go back to flood irrigating, that's a 30-inch pipe that's got to be put down through that field to get the water to me. And so these are my concerns, and I want to know what happens before they remove any ditches or start doing any of the building in there. So.
Anything else, Fred?
Okay, I thank you for hearing me. I hope we can get it worked out.
Thank you.
As far as the zone change, I have no problem with them changing zoning, but my concern is the irrigation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, let's move out of public hearing. Looks like we've got a couple of questions and issues for staff: traffic reduction, traffic concerns, and the irrigation, the ditches that are up there. Dave is the applicant for this here tonight.
Yeah,
Is there anything
absolutely.
they'd like to?
And his engineer, maybe I just mentioned on the traffic, and you might have thoughts as well, or Brandon, or Scott. I think the concern is absolutely valid. Again, I really believe that this is an important connection to have. I think it's going to serve the community very, very well. Obviously, there's no traffic today that the neighbors to the east of this property really have to deal with. That would change overnight. I think there is reason to believe, given the nature of the road where there's not necessarily any kind of curvature or bend on the road, at least nothing really significant, there probably would be a propensity for people to travel. In addition to that, the road's going to be a little bit wider than your typical neighborhood streets. I think speed is a concern that absolutely we should look at and try to mitigate with this development. And I think it probably would involve trying to employ some kind of traffic calming measures on Canyon Crest Drive, either on the subject property or maybe even to the east. It may make some sense to do that as well in connection with the school, potential places to, allow for pedestrian crossings, just talking about crosswalks.
Crosswalk.
Which sometimes offer great opportunities to do things that absolutely force drivers to slow down. You slow down or your vehicle gets damaged. So I think those are things we can look at. And Mike, I don't know if you have any thoughts, but I think that's a very valid issue.
Yeah, we work with the school district and the police department to address any concerns. We have traffic counters when we go see the impacted, so it'll actually be noticeable day one, but also there'll be no houses day one. It'll be phased. There'll be built over several years. But yeah, crosswalks, reduced with chicanes, other different traffic calming measures there are in place. There is slight bends in it. Usually if you see more like this road here, that's probably about as long as you want to go, then you start seeing the higher speeds. Again, we have slight bends. Drivers start paying attention to their speed when they have to deviate slightly. So the natural course of the ridge helps with that. We're very aware of, we have lots of elementary schools, and we're working with different agencies, different funding sources to find the most cost-effective way to reduce speeds.
You guys do the narrowing on the corners where the road bends a little
You
bit?
can see those, like on this one.
Yeah.
Again, long straightaway to have a reduced width here, a visual reduction.
Is it possible to do that here as well?
You could, we normally don't do it on the collector road. Again,
Wonder
it's
if
more
in-
built for
In this case, though, I wonder if you would maybe want to. Because you've got the slope right here as well, and I remember as a teenager, I didn't care about damage to my car. There was a road on the way to the high school with a big old dip. We tried to catch as much air as we could. And if you've got a slope right here, and you're a teenager flying down this road, you're gonna, I don't know, maybe not, but I would think that you'd probably want to try where the slope is to try and reduce as much as you could right there. I think she's got a valid concern, so.
I think it's a valid concern as well. I have a son and grandchildren on that road further north and east, and the speed can get up a little higher, but for the most part, it seems like the residents of that area keep their speed down. I haven't seen, 70 miles an hour on that road, but anytime you've got kids there, I think that that's a valid concern, and what we can do, we should do there. Sorry.
Are you the applicant?
I am the applicant. So my name is Gil Berenson. I'm the manager of High Sky Estates LLC. And so I just wanted to speak to the irrigation question. And so we've had several conversations with Fred Vinson about trying to facilitate getting onto the pressurized irrigation system. It looks like that's not going to work out. So we're headed towards piping the ditch through the property.
Can you point out just for us where the ditch is at exactly with the pointer? Thank you.
Yeah, you can see it clearly. Yeah, it's a lot more clear on this aerial view. It comes across the top of the property and then down through this section and then under the road to Fred's property. So, where that aligns exactly with the streets and so on, it's not entirely clear to us right now. We haven't done the detailed plan for that and all the utilities and so on. This is a preliminary plat. So, but we do have to meet requirements of the irrigation company. We know there's an engineering firm that they hire that we have to work with to meet their requirements. So that's our plan right now, is to do that. Make sure we meet Fred's interests.
So what you would do then is pipe this over to his property, and then your development itself would be on pressurized irrigation, is that?
Yes. Right.
Where's PI at right now? Where's it stubbed in?
There's a couple, well, what we had looked at potentially for Fred's pressurized irrigation, there's a 10 or a 12 inch right in this area? 12 inch line here. And there's a smaller line that comes down this street. We believe the water capacity would be fine for, using pressurized irrigation for Fred's agricultural needs. But the issue is the cost.
Yeah. So I assume that ditch, John, maybe goes up in here somewhere, or does it come over this way?
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that a little bit because I'm quite familiar with this ditch. That ditch was one of the main ditches on the east bench that provided water almost nearly to the cemetery almost. And of course the development here has left this development an island, but East Bench Canal Company has put a lot of money in, they put in a cement pipe that leaked, and that pipe starts in here and goes across right on the brow of the hill. They did that to protect all of those homes along there, and there are signs that designate that now. when that concrete ditch began to leak, they went to the cost of actually lining that pipe with HDPE pipe. That's a high-density polyethylene pipe. It's very expensive. It's an oil product. They had to pull that through that entire length from over on Canyon Road.
Wow.
And that's what there is there now. That HDPE pipe is likely to never leak. It was put in at a great cost, and of course, the first benefactors were the Beerensons here, and then Fred. But at the time it was put in, it was also servicing quite a bit more ground to the west. And so if pressurized irrigation were available for Fred's farm here on a permanent basis and a cost-effective basis, Fred would be happy to do that, I'm sure. But the problem of it is that the cost of the water is prohibitive to staying agricultural if the city stays with their cost of the water being delivered through their system. The people who are there now are watering with a pump, and they're not using a lot of water. But as agricultural land goes, they may not be the leaseors of that ground, or leasees, I should say, of this ground in another few years. And if that happens, what Mr. Vincent is saying is that if he has to go back to watering that field in another way, he needs the ditch, because there is no other way to get that water to his ground. So what Gil is saying is that if they'll put a pipe in, that still makes that water available at the ag rate. It's just a lot more expensive for the applicant. It's going to be a lot more expensive to get that pipe over there than if you would have been able to have negotiated something with the city on the cost of the water and stuff like that. So I don't know where that went exactly, Fred. I don't know exactly how that went, but if it's not available, then he needs to be able to make his farm productive as long as he would like to. And, you know, it sounds like you're working that out with the owner of that ground, Fred Vincent, and if that can be worked out, I would certainly make that a condition of this application, that this needs to have some kind of a signed agreement before we tear up ditches. It's happened on the East Bench before, and both of you guys are aware of it. The developers were able to go in, tear out ditches. Canal Company didn't even know it, and they went to deliver water in the spring, and there's no ditch. And if they would have put anything in there, it would have flooded many homes. So this is a good time to have this come up and have it discussed.
So you're correct that it's going to add costs for us as developers to do that. We've offered to facilitate through some of the costs that would be passed on to Fred to go on pressurized irrigation, but still having to be able to work that out.
Right.
So.
Well, I just want to mention, I called Horowitz, it's renting my ground, and Judd says, hey, we are not paying only what we are paying for our water that's getting delivered down that ditch. He says, we're not paying agriculture rate. We're farming, we've had that water there, and we can pump out of the ditch. Or else we're gonna just, if we have to go with pressurized irrigation, they're gonna have to just let us pay for the water that we're using and run it through their system. But otherwise, I'm gonna be looking for a new renter.
And we're talking about two of the oldest landowners on the East Bench at this time. Your families have been there for as long as anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, great neighbors.
Yeah.
And so if this can be worked out, but I think that it has to be worked out and some kind of an agreement signed so that that ditch is taken care of. Time is a funny thing. It runs faster than we think it does. And if something were to happen, I'm sure you would like to develop as soon as possible, and that ditch will have to be replaced before it's torn out.
Yeah, I mean, the land's been in my family for a little over 100 years. We've decided it's time to move away from agriculture and develop it. So, I'm 100% confident that we'll reach some kind of agreement with Fred. It's, it looks like we're headed towards piping the ditch through the property. And to do that, to the irrigation company's satisfaction and to Fred's satisfaction.
Very good.
It's gotta meet that is a company ditch, the East Bench Canal Company has gotta be responsible for how it's done.
Great. So my question to staff is that something we can add to the condition of this, change?
Yeah, come on.
Sure.
Come on.
You have our utility plan in there. So Scott Peterson, I'm with Atlas Engineering, doing the design there. I've been taking direction from my client on that and what the latest is and being able to work it out with Fred. Like you said, Gil understands perfectly that water's got to stay there for him, and he's had us do a design. It's kind of hard to see on there. I didn't have the class. So that ditch comes in right here. In working with East Bench on other projects, we know that it's better in the road. So we got it out into the road as soon as we could here, and it stays in the road for access until we deliver it back to the same point. And so it's in the preliminary design, and it will be part of final to get it signed off by the canal company before we do it. So Gil's kind of addressed that from the get-go.
Has it been discussed what kind of pipe you'll put in?
Yeah, Fred tells us because he's the president of the water company.
Awfully convenient.
Yeah, and I assume, Fred, it will be HDP. That's what we planned on. It'd be
Yeah.
the same welded HDP.
Great.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll work on that.
Sounds like you're working on it. Good deal. Good job.
Anyone else? I can't remember. Are we still in public hearing?
We're out.
We're out? We're in? Okay, thank
We're
you.
in.
Anyone else want to address this?
I just wanted to clarify.
If you could come up again, please. Thank you.
Mendenhall mentioned his family lives at the end of Canyon Crest Drive. The study that was done was on 2900, which is on a hillside, which it would be the same problem that we would have on Canyon Crest Drive. I agree that residents on Canyon Crest Drive drive very slowly, and that's because the road is windy and a smooth bend in the road. But on 2900, it's a straight shot. Same with this addition to Canyon Crest. So I just wanted to make that clear on that.
Thank you. Any additional comments from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion for the High Sky Estates.
Go ahead, John. Do it.
I will make a motion that the High Sky Estates zone change and preliminary plat approval request be recommended to the City Council with the recommended conditions. And I would add that another condition would be that the water issue be resolved and signed before implementation of any construction.
Thank you. Got a motion
I'll second it.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Section 5, preliminary plats. Preliminary plats are not public hearings, so we will start first with Annie's Acres.
Thank you. I'm probably going to be pretty brief. We've talked about this a lot over the course of the past few years. I'm just going to give a little bit of background and then let the applicants present some of the details about the project. This is before you tonight, largely because the city initiated a study to review really traffic patterns in this part of the community. And what ultimately we have come to feel is the most appropriate way to connect streets of different types. And in order to keep our options open, we requested that the applicant stop construction on their project earlier this year. They were patient, they were cooperative, they did that. And the design that's before you tonight really is the result of a couple of changes that were made. I'm gonna steal this right fast. I might give it back. I'll try to remember to. You might recall that with the preliminary plat that was approved last year, the plan was to have a fairly significant route go kind of right through the middle of the project. Hey, that's a great, yeah. So this illustrates clearly the difference between what we'll look at tonight and what was approved previously. So a fairly substantial road, making a connection ultimately in with Volunteer Drive here. And the idea at the time was that this would be a fairly significant intersection with a route that someday potentially could continue south through the river bottoms and tie back into perhaps River Bottoms Road someplace near the golf course even. In short, the plan now is to, instead of having this intersection happen here, to have a pretty significant intersection here, probably employing a roundabout to handle traffic as a part of that intersection, which really has diminished the need for this route through the project to be a sizable road. So rather than being a collector type road, it will just be a local street. I don't know if you have anything you want to add, maybe relative to that image.
I did add the updated roundabout layout.
Is that it?
It's the next slide.
Okay.
Right there.
Yeah, so this is a little different orientation. So instead of north being up, north is now to our left. This is perhaps what a roundabout would look like on the southeast corner of a project, with this really being a prominent intersection in the area rather than having that happen perhaps and maybe at the midpoint along the southern boundary of the project. And the route that someone would take to get from the southern part of the project, or I guess maybe vice versa, up to the north, can be more circuitous with them just being local streets. The applicants have taken advantage of that with the redesign, and I'll let them talk about some things that affords them in terms of housing products that they can incorporate into the project. This does, however, allow for something that I think is really important, which is still to make a local street connection that ultimately could tie into that Volunteer Drive, Main Street, right now three-way intersection, but someday four-way intersection. That's really what's led us to be here, is a relook at, again, kind of that transportation network for this part of the community. Like I said, the applicant has taken the opportunity with the redesign to look at adding a different type of housing product to the project. We spoke with them about that just earlier today. And I'll let you tell us what you think, but frankly, I think it's likely a very good addition to the development.
Trying to understand the reason for the roundabout. So, you talking years down the road, you think it's gonna be busy enough there for a roundabout? Because 300 East, especially with this curve right here, it's pretty slow, pretty narrow road. What's the city's thoughts or plans for 300 East in the future?
300 East will not carry a lot of traffic, is my thought.
The roundabout would be for circulating a huge amount of traffic. From 300 East would be the coming off of Arrowhead, coming across Main Street, coming down into the river bottoms.
So that's the
we're not
purpose.
sure.
So if somebody gets on 300 East, they're not stuck there forever with all the cars
There'll be
coming out.
driveways onto 300 East. It'll be acting more like a small local road that comes into a larger road.
And maybe, Mike, you can speak to this. You certainly can better than I can, but the South Lane Main Street intersection, I think that has a limited lifespan. So this, in part, I think, is to plan for what potentially is a lot of traffic coming from a new intersection with Main Street that would be south of the South Lane Main Street intersection someplace.
Sort of the time frame on the future alignment on that. What are we looking at? Yeah, the south one. This, well, both of them.
A little bit, and I'll try and talk loud enough so I
Well,
don't
both of them.
yelled at by our sound guy. Hales Engineering did a traffic study that said at the 93rd, I believe, unit, this intersection fails. UDOT doesn't like it. It's unsignalized. It's too close to this intersection. At 93 units, there's too much traffic. It's not safe. So they said, we're saying 92 units, that's the max. Then we need to look for another alternative. In our transportation master plan, we looked at modeling that route versus this route. They were similar, this one was more effective, and this land would be, this is a wide road. It takes quite a bit of space, and for the length it is to connect a major arterial down into here versus this one, it's quite a bit longer, eats up a lot of commercial area here. This is more of a straight shot out to a future, or to the interchange in Benjamin. So through modeling, through work with professional transportation engineers, this is the better route. And it also provides a lot more space for this development as well as this development. Much narrower street, more local feel rather than a busy road bisecting a residential community. We keep it out, keep it here.
So what are we looking like then?
So
Time
this
frame?
road will still be a connection through, it'll be small, commercial type road. Where we don't know what it'll look like, we don't know what will come here. We've had brief conversations, they were very in favor of the narrow road, having worked with a different type of commercial. Sorry, what was the rest of your question?
So the southern one, how we looking on, it's the future? A year, 2, 3, what do you think?
This one will be when funding's available, when we can get funding from MAC. There's discussions with other funding agencies trying to get them on board with the idea.
Will the roundabout take place at that time?
It'll take place when the traffic study says it needs to be.
But it's not part of this request, okay?
No,
Because,
this is the request.
This is the request.
The idea is we don't know exactly the river bottoms, how it will go, but the idea is if a roundabout is placed here, it'll be after a study's done. There's a demand for it, it's worth the cost. What we wanted to accomplish with this is, does it fit? Does it work? Let's designate an area that if we do want, if there is a need for it, it will fit with this subdivision.
So what was the study again? How many would make it fill, the one road?
93.
How many?
92 or 93, something.
And how many is this one? How many units is this one? Doing these in phases, Vicki? Okay.
Again, roundabout's not part of the approval, it was just, that's where one would go when a traffic study says that it's time to put it.
very good.
So we know we've got a connector over here somewhere that'll take you to the trail. Is there anything that fronts this road, between the road and the houses, that will be a trail that will tie into that at some point? Any trail plans with this development?
Is it on the north side of South Lane? So north side of South Lane, and there's been some discussion about how to make a trail connection then from South Lane up to the fairgrounds. That's a little bit in flux. There's a group that's been looking at potentially developing the property next to this one to the west. And we've talked with them about including that in their design.
But for this design, there's not.
Just this part, I think, along the frontage is the only public trail. With the other street, the previous design had a trail included as part of that collector road corridor.
The previous trail was going to go along this larger road. Any of our collector roads has a trail as part of the cross-section on one of the sides and sidewalk being the other. With this one, it would have gone through the community up and connected to Volunteer Drive. This one rather would then come through, connect up to the other river trail. Because there's the two little spots here.
The road right there, yeah.
And then be able to connect in that
Yeah,
spot.
yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Now in their new layout, you can actually see there are walking trails. They aren't public walking trails as part of the community, but there's still that active lifestyle connection there.
Very good.
Who's
Yeah.
next?
Applicants want to get up and speak?
Sure. Do we have the home plans that we brought? Well, let me talk about the layout first. So,
Bert, you didn't say your name.
Bert, you gotta give us your name.
Bert
We
Bradford.
know who to come and find.
Bert Bradford.
Yeah.
So what it allowed us to do when this road got taken out, which was a collector road, couldn't front houses on it, it kind of limited what we could do with the middle space here, especially the open space. So before we had 2.5 acres of open space, but it was split in half. Now we have, if you measure this, there's 3 acres of open space right there, which is the size of a city park. It also gave more space in here to do this new product that Arrive Homes is going to start doing. They've got a couple projects, but this might be the first one where they do these, I don't know what we call them. My mom calls them cottages. They're like a detached fourplex. But these, it's deceiving when you look at the scale of this. These look like they're small homes, but they're big. That's a 45 by 65 building pad. So a 2,500 square foot home can fit on these pads. So anyway, it gave us the opportunity to put this, which kind of a premium, nicer product in there. And then it tied the open space all together to where it's, instead of split an 1.25 acres on each side, it's 3 acres of total open space in the middle there. So yeah, that made it really nice. And then we've got some home plans that is that one that's one of the cottages? Or is that just a?
These are the plans we drew, we just don't have a cottage, that's a sample of the other ones we do that would be the same kind of material.
Yeah. They're, anyway, yeah, those are the size of homes that will.
That's the product that fits in those pads, that's what's deceiving.
Yeah. You look at it and it kind of gives the impression that it's like a dense thing, but it'll be a really nice feel.
And you plan on putting some of these type of homes in that first phase? Is that?
I think there's a couple.
This is the first phase.
Yes.
It was already started, so we band-aided this thing together, which turned out to be
Name, please.
What's your name?
peas, here in 2 potatoes. So the first phase was the lower part that we had to incorporate, so that already has.
So
the first phase is down in here.
Now it's these units, these 5, and it splits
So
right
we
there.
do,
So there's 2 of
we
those do
do
in the
get
first
2 of
unit.
those fourplexes in there. We had to kind of, a little bit unique trying to incorporate that because a lot of the pipe work was already done, so. That was what's good about Bert, to be able to come in
Each other a little.
a little bit, yeah. Very little.
There's some of the land, this was another thing we wanted to ask permission to change. Before we were approved for pavilions in the open space, as we've done some research and talked with Arrive, in these type of communities, we feel like the pavilions don't get used as much as they should. We want to do instead a putting green, some fire pits, which this isn't a good, we couldn't find a picture of the exact ones we want to do, but it would be more of a recessed, maybe a 25 foot diameter, step down in recessed thing with a fire pit in the middle and like a bench all the way around.
Gas fire pit.
Gas fire pit, maybe a few of those.
Your experience, that's what the 55 and older communities want?
Yeah, more than pavilion. And then we played with the idea, we want to get your opinion on pickleball courts. We at first we thought we were too close to the sports park where people would just go to there.
Close.
So maybe we'll put some pickleball courts
They
into.
would get used. I guarantee you they would get used.
How many do we have at this?
16, and living over there, you can hear them every night. They're busy, so yeah, I guarantee you they would get used if you put a couple in.
So that's a possibility too. Really, it's not changed that much other than the middle part, which just makes it it's just better all around.
Yeah, that's really nice.
That's one of the 4-plex units that was approved in the first, these that are attached. And those will be those will be super nice. Those will be big. They're like 2,200 square feet each one. So,
Will those be slab on grade or will they
yeah,
be
yeah, there's no,
crawl space?
oh, no, well,
Yeah,
crawl space.
There'll be crawl space, and then we incorporate all of them have available. We probably be building most of them with a bonus area that grandkids they can come visit.
Crawl space allows you to have even less steps. Like with a slab on grade, you usually still end up with a step or two. With a crawl space, you can set your floor joists down in and have less, maybe one step into the homes.
Very good.
I think that's it, unless you have any other questions.
Thanks.
Is that it from everybody? Any additional questions for staff or?
What are those homes that are running out on Fourth South look like? Or third south?
Those will be like a normal, just like those, that right there.
Dave, do you have any comments, questions?
Just one other thing, and honestly, I don't think it's necessarily for you guys to worry about. We'll talk more with the city council about it. We've talked to the applicants a little bit about it. I think you're going to see this become routine for us where we are recommending that applicants enter into a development agreement with the city. And I think one of the primary things that we're going to want to address in a development agreement is a project's phasing. I think we want to make sure we understand exactly what infrastructure is going in with each phase. It's everything from streets and sidewalks to landscaping and amenities. And I think that's probably one thing that we need to give some more thought to before we get into this any farther. But I don't think that's necessarily anything that you need to worry about. But I will probably talk more with that about, probably will talk more with the city council about that when this gets to them.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion for the Annie's Acres preliminary plat.
Go ahead, Clint.
I'll make a motion that we, is it approve or?
Recommend.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we recommend the Annie Acres plat, preliminary plat to the city council.
Got a motion?
I second it.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Hall Industrial preliminary plat.
This was approved with 3 lots. They want to do 4 lots. It doesn't change the plan relative to utilities and that type of thing all that much at all. The DRC's recommended that this be approved. We recommend that you approve it tonight.
4 smaller lots versus the 3 bigger?
2 lots remain unchanged. There's a 3rd lot that then gets split in 2 right there. Incidentally, this is 10th North. This is 3rd West, kind of right over here. PDM Steel is kind of in the area here, just in case that helps orient anybody. And incidentally, I think this is going to be a great project. We really lack shovel-ready lots for any kind of non-residential development, particularly for the kind of development that our I-1 zone is intended to permit. So even just having 4 of those such lots available, I think is a great addition to the community. And in an area like this, we'd love to see more of that type of thing, so.
I have a question about this one with the one lot being split into 2. That's on the west side of the lot. There's a lane there.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, right there. Would access to the lot on the south have to be along that lane?
Given the way the plat's designed.
It's owned by somebody else.
Yes.
That's one thing. And then there is a major irrigation ditch that's along that lane. And then there's another one on the north, or on the east side of the property that's very visible as well, that goes over and across the road to the more or less triangle piece and on down towards the airport. So both of those ditches come into play here. And I'm sure, the halls are well aware of those, I guess. But I would imagine that in this entire project, they'll be either, well, they'll be working with the canal company to get their approval, right?
Well, and I believe they have. This is under construction now,
Yes.
just with the 3 lots. So frankly, I'm probably taking this a little bit lightly tonight, just because I think the infrastructure and utility issues had already been hashed through before. Not that this is not that this is a formality that we take lightly, but just the process of splitting that last lot into.
That's what sparks the discussion, because if that has to be accessed on the west, there is an issue of the road and the ownership
And the
of that
ditch.
road, as well as the ditch.
So
That
this
that didn't necessarily come in before.
With the previous approval, though, we were requiring them to develop that as
Develop a road
frontage.
there?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
so
So it must have
And-
been okayed.
you probably know more about.
These ditches being removed, no longer needed, the west ditch is being pumped.
Oh, they are going to pipe that west ditch. Hallelujah. That's a great project. That fed my property in Palmyra.
Oh, the west one? Oh, on the plan says to be piped, but it's,
It'll remain open, but the road won't cover it, but the other ditch is removed.
Well,
to be
it,
piped when the restaurant's finished. So they're finishing 1/2 + 10 of that road on
Okay.
the west, and it sits just off the edge of that.
and that's been
So
approved
it
through the
will-
canal company?
I guess, yes.
Okay. Yeah, West Peel. Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Good project.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Hall Industrial amended preliminary plat.
Recommend.
No, I don't,
With this not
Oh, we
being a
approved this
master
one.
plan development, you are the land use authority.
Okay.
Right, so I would recommend that we approve the Hall Industrial amended preliminary plat as written with the conditions that are set forth in the document.
Have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, one more item, is that right? Title 15 amendments.
Yep. Maybe 2 parts to the item. I'm not seeing Jason jump up with this one. Here's what I know about it. I
Come
know
on,
that
Jason.
there
Jump.
is a requirement now that we enjoy as a municipality to accommodate in our zoning what's referred to as a cannabis production establishment. So our
Why did we
recommendation
have
is
Fred
that
Bill?
we allow that in 2 different zoning districts that we have in the community, which I think also is a requirement that now is found in the state code, that we allow it in an agricultural zone and in an industrial zone. Our recommendation is to allow it in probably our most limited agricultural zone, which is our exclusive agricultural zone, and what is definitely our most limited industrial zone, which is our, which is our I3 zone. So the idea, I think, is to open up that opportunity for somebody to have such a facility in Spanish Fork in as limited of a way as we possibly can. And that's really the proposal that's before you tonight.
State law does allow for it, as you're aware that there was a proposition made last year and voted upon that authorized or legalized medical cannabis in the state of Utah. Based on that, the legislature then changed parts of it with an agreement with the major players on the other side, and they have gotten a statute that now allows for it. Most cities are of the opinion that they don't really want them necessarily, but if it happens, it is a requirement that you allow them. So the states come out and said, look, there's a couple of different zones you can put them in, and they give you a whole myriad of zones, excluding residential is the main one, and commercial. There is only 8 licenses that will be given out anyway, so chances of it happening here are probably fairly slim. And as Dave's pointed out, the Amount of purely agricultural zone that we have is very small within the city limits. And then secondly, the industrial zone, there is some place for that, but it's probably unlikely going to happen. We just have to allow it. And
Where do we have that zone at, or those zones for the industrial that would fit? Is it north end of town?
Is there enough irrigation in those zones to even?
The I-3,
I think these are actually probably
These,
indoor processing.
yeah, they're all indoors.
they're not growing.
They're not outside, they're, basically the state law said that if you don't regulate it under our conditions, then we will just allow it. If they happen to be in your city, you will
We're
allow
forced
it.
to let it go anywhere.
So we are able to limit it to certain spots. That's what we've done, and that's what we're asking you to do tonight. And then secondly, the city council will recommend the same in a couple of weeks.
So which ones on this map would be allowed then?
This is the only I-3 zoning I think that we have in the city right now.
The old Trojan.
Is that in the city?
This is not Trojan. Trojan would be on the other side of US 6.
Okay.
There to the north, this is Windmills.
Inside the windmills?
Gravel pit.
Windmills gravel pit.
And
Hey,
that
gives wind, right?
exclusively agricultural
Supplies
zone.
power.
It's on the books. I don't know where we have it
But it's somewhere.
on the ground.
I
If we have it,
I
there's
thought there
not
was a
much of it.
small sliver
Sounds,
somewhere.
sounds like a really good couple of zones to have.
Yeah, the approach, honestly, that we've taken, Richard might have been around long enough to remember sexually oriented businesses and zoning for those. Kind of the same concept exists where, hey, you have to allow them in your community. And unless you pick a spot and clearly define where they're allowed, you get to allow them everywhere. So you'll see communities that have, and we certainly do, have very restrictive and very explicit zoning language that defines where they can and can't go in the community. So it's kind of that same.
That's our only zone right there. That's our only zone right now in the city, is that spot right there.
It's the only I-3. We might have some agricultural zoning someplace, but it's not jumping out at me.
It's not next to McDonald's and it's not next to.
It's available, doesn't mean you actually have one zone. That's, I mean, it's a possibility.
That's how we look at it, I think, is that it's on the books. If somebody wanted to request a zone change to that or something like that.
Change an RR to an AE because I want to have a processing something, but it's there.
Has there been an interest in establishing a,
Not that we're aware of.
not yet for Spanish Fork, okay?
No, the applications that the state, you may have seen on the news, the state has gotten a number of applications for the growing portion of this. They haven't ruled on, they haven't made their decision as to who will get them, so and that's been protected information. They haven't let anybody know. So we don't really know where these are intending to go. The assumption is that they're likely, well, at least one in the Salt Lake County area, I assume. Beyond that, I don't know. Summit County, maybe. But Utah County, it's hard to say. But we're doing what we can just to make sure that if someone were to get one of those licenses and wanted to come to Spanish Fork, we can limit it to a certain area.
Any benefit to a city having one of those within city limits?
I mean, honestly, I think it's like maybe any manufacturer might be some employment probably.
Jobs. Can't tax them a certain way differently than others?
I think their tax would be the same as, I'm not even sure how they'll be
Payroll tax and
taxed.
different things that really happen at the state level, not
Nothing on the city level.
property tax.
It wouldn't be sales tax or anything associated with that because they do not sell it to anyone. They sell it, or they hand it over to the state. I'm not sure if it's sold or how it'll be done, but it'll be given to the state.
That's part one. I don't know if you want to take these together or not. Okay. We talked a little bit earlier about the Hillside development standards. when we went and visited sites earlier in the week, we talked a little bit about it then as well. I'm gonna let Mike fill in all of the gaps that I create by just saying that I think that at the end of the day, this ordinance, while allowing for development in some places that our previous ordinance would not have allowed, like the High Sky Estates that we looked at earlier tonight, at the end of the day, really, it's still more restrictive than what we had before in a couple of key ways. Requires a greater setback from a structure and a slope so that we ultimately won't have a type of construction which has happened east of the High Sky Estates property that we looked at there along Canyon Crest Drive and that ridge, and different things like that, that I think at the end of the day probably are much, much more responsible than how our regulations have read in the past. Mike's kind of taken the lead, and I think he's been the most involved of any of us here on getting this rewritten, so.
Yeah, the Berenson property was the main, kind of push to say, hey, let's look at this. They proposed something that didn't meet the standard, but looking at it actually improved the hillside, improved safety, of the hill. So we said, hey, let's take a look at it. We contacted other municipalities, we contacted some geotechnical engineers and said, we need to revamp this. This is a great product. It makes sense. How can we make our standard better? But still protect our residents, protect our developments. So we worked with Draper, worked with an IGES geotechnical firm, and we drafted this. It's been through a lot of revisions, trying to make it make sense. I think it's a good step forward. It requires much more in-depth slope analysis on the slope, looking at different, more components than the previous one did. So in the end, it protects our residents while allowing us to, just get us closer to a better code, protects the hillsides we want to protect, and it lets us develop on ones that should be developed and that are safe. So.
Maybe I just had one other thing. I appreciated a question or a comment that Commissioner Argyle brought up when we talked about this earlier in the week, just relative to interfacing with developers, getting their feedback when we propose different changes to ordinances like this. In this case, we didn't do, really a broad advertisement to try to solicit comments on this ordinance. I think a lot of times that is a good idea, and we've done that somewhat regularly in the past. In this case, we did work very, very closely, like Mr. Clark mentioned, with the applicants on the High Sky Estates project. So I don't know if that is very reassuring, but we did have that kind of correspondence and feedback as these standards were developed. And the company that we used, I understand that they've worked kind of on both sides of the counter, both for municipalities as well as for the development community. So I think having their input and involvement here probably lends itself to things being fairly balanced as well.
They also, the company we used is the same one that did the Vincent Ridge development just down the road here. That retaining wall you see on the side, they designed it. They were their geotechnical engineers for the project. So they understand that hillside. So there's no other reason we kind of help us out. One other thing, sometimes developments don't go so well, and you have maybe bank by it has to take some of them, or things doesn't go as planned when asked our geotechnical engineers. So if that goes wrong, think Oak Ridge Cove, 2008, 9, 10. If this doesn't go well, is this geotechnical report enough with our new one, our new standards, that we can sell the individual, the bank can sell individual lots rather than having a whole builder? Like, is there enough information for a homeowner to feel comfortable buying this and the contractor designing it? And he said, yes, it would be. But the old one wasn't
Good.
quite there. So kind of, obviously, we're not planning on that happening, but
It will,
It did happen.
and
so
it will.
We wanted to, I want to make sure that was going to be a protection we could get for this.
Right. Any thoughts, comments?
I would ask, what are the main, there must be several main deviations from the old standards. What's noteworthy about these? Or are they subtle and would only be understood by the geotech companies and the city?
No, great questions. As far as the analysis goes, that's above. They use very expensive programs to run slope analysis based on the stratification of the different soil layers, what it's made up of. I'll believe them, and it's what they've done for communities for decades, so I'll let them deal with that one. What we did that would be a difference, I guess, is saying what hillside can be disturbed. What do we want to have or allow to be disturbed? You may be able to say, yeah, I can build on that, but do we want it to be built on? Sometimes you see images of other countries, you have houses built on the cliff, and their backyard is 200 feet down to the edge, that can be done, but do we want it to happen in the community? So we looked at slopes, we used LiDAR, billions of light points that the county collected and said, where are our steep slopes? Where does it make sense to say, we really don't want to touch it, even if it could be, it's still pretty steep. So we landed on, and pull just some general numbers so you can have an idea.
Yeah, you had the percentage of slope.
We talk about anything more than a 10-to-1 slope, we want to have a land disturbance permit. So even if it's just pretty gradual slope, it's still a slope, and we had an issue with the White Rail subdivision where it was a gradual slope, but they made it into a steeper slope. And so before it was just saying 30%, if it's greater, you have to do a geotech. If it's less than that, you're good to go. Well, 30% is still a pretty decent slope, and so we kind of broke into smaller categories. So if it's a decent slope, you need to do such and such. If it's a 3-to-1 slope, you need to do so much analysis on it. If it gets steeper than 2-to-1, it's going up the hills you've seen down here. We don't touch it.
So those are more specific now than
Very
what they were
specific.
before.
And we have a map. I don't have it here, but it shows areas in town based on this LiDAR data we got that says no developing here.
I live.
Steep slopes. You would probably live on one of those.
Yeah, I can go and.
Steep slopes.
No, and that's one of the reasons is that where I live, some of those lots exist, and in a way, I feel a little sorry for the whoever owns those lots, that they'll be unbuildable. But it's been a while now since I kind of figured that there are lots that are purchased and they'll be okay. Remaining lots probably are unsold because they're going to have a very tough time with the standards that we have now. And with new standards, I think that there's maybe 5 lots up there that are unbuildable. But I think that we all knew that they were anyway.
We had our suspicions, which is partly why after that project got approved, we developed the Hillside Development Standards that were step 1 towards what we're talking about tonight.
I was step 1.
You were?
I was the very first lot that came under those. And
Well, that's right. By the time you actually built, we did have those standards in place. Yep.
Richard had the foundation poured, and the footings and foundation were poured. And the geotech outfit that came out said, well, this is a no-brainer and easy because everything's excavated. We don't have to drill holes. We can see what's here. And it was true. Everything was exposed. But although they'd been passed, there was no one to enforce it on at that time. And so it was after the fact. I get calls occasionally from people who are interested in one of those lots up there, mainly because they reduced the price so significantly that they're going, oh man, I can get a lot up there for that price, and then they come up and look at it. And then their next question is are we going to be able to build on that? And I sit them down on Main Street and Center Street to find out, knowing kind of what the answer is. But I like that these are going to be defined you know, without any questions, so as someone looks at it, there's a couple of people that have asked about extremely steep lots. And I don't know how they really expect to do anything with them, but they think they can. You know, looking at the present, what the restrictions are now, so I think these are good to define that more and make sure that people are safe.
We've seen horrible, horrible things happen when development happens on benches, you know, in certain terrain, to where something's not handled the right way and the results are catastrophic. And we don't want to be talked about relative to homes sliding, homes splitting,
Starts to slip away.
any of those types of things. And you've really seen it from one end of the Wasatch Front to the other over years. Now, that all being said, one of the things that I like about working in Spanish Fork is that hillside development really is not a big deal. And just in terms of the overall scale of our landscape and what we have to deal with and that type of a thing. One of the things that was done as part of the review of this, like Mike said, was we did a slope analysis of the city to see where we have the 3-to-1 or the 4-to-1 type slopes. And it's not a big part of the area, but I think with these standards, as I see it, really the biggest change is to go away from language that says, hey, if you have a 30% slope, it is completely hands-off. You can't do anything, which is why high sky estates couldn't happen unless this changes. So that's been changed to, instead of just carte blanche saying you can't do anything with it, to saying if these conditions exist and if you're able to do these things, then you can do something with a slope like that. And from my perspective, that's really the biggest thing I think that we're accomplishing with this proposal.
Two more really quick ones, I'll be hopefully the last here. So one last thing in your packet is their plans. Two things that this allows us to do. See if you can see this decent enough. I'm going to have to pull up another one. So Canyon Crest Drive is the one along the ridge line of High Sky Estates. This dashed line is the slope. Obviously, it's way steeper than this, but to get the scale of it all in one picture, this is what they drew. So you can see that it comes up, and then the tabletops comes flat. What they're proposing to do, well, first of all, this slope would say, don't touch it. We don't want you to touch it, it doesn't meet our standard. What they're saying is, let's cut the slope, let's make it more gradual. It's this solid line here, lay the slope back, as it were called. And then we can bring it back up to meet the normal, the existing grade here. So what it does, in fact, it makes the slope safer, but also then gives them walkout basements, more backyard area, more use of the slope. So in our mind, it's a win-win, but our current standard said, sorry, you can't touch it. It's like, well, in some instances, it makes complete sense to, what do we need to adjust to make this a possibility? That was one. Number two, pull this other one. This is golf course. This is Dripping Rock Trail, if you've ever been there. On one side, you have a really pretty vegetation, river, all that. On the other side, if you notice, there's chicken wire, there's rocks, there's debris. It's a pretty dangerous slope. There's usually rocks on the trail. According to our standards, golf balls, the city can't touch that slope. That is way more than 30%. We would be breaking our own hillside ordinance if we went and even touched it. So part of the hillside ordinance, again, not to get into the nitty-gritty, but it does say if the slope is seen to be, not exact verbiage, dangerous geologic conditions, there's a slope hazard, then with the DRC's approval, then, or city engineer's approval, I can't remember which approval, they can go in and remediate it. So it gives us that allowance to go in and remediate slopes that may be a hazard, so.
That makes sense. Any changes to those? Title 15, is that all?
Close.
Close, but I missed it.
Okay, anything else, guys? Recommend, or I entertain a motion for the Title 15 amendment changes.
Plan?
Oh, actually, before I do that, sorry. Yep, this is public hearing. Thank you, Jason. So let's move into public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this? Okay, seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing. And now I will entertain a motion.
All right, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Title 15 amendments as they have been explained.
Have a motion
I'll second it.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, Dave, anything else before we adjourn?
Appreciate your time. Thank you. Really, nothing else from us tonight. League of Cities and Towns Conference, the second Thursday in September. I'll be reaching out just to see if you guys want us to get you registered for that
Great.
Thursday day or not here in the next week or two.
One little gem of information about that is that one of Spanish Fork City's councilmen will be installed as the new state president of the League of Cities and Towns.
Pretty cool. You want to say who it is?
Pretty cool. I know his mother.
All right, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second it.
Adjourned.
Aye, aye, aye.